and welcome to this week's Digital CxO podcast. I'm Amanda Razani, and with me today is Mike Vizard. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Wonderful. Well, first, we're going to talk about AI. Of course, that's a big topic everywhere. And Mike, you just recently shared an article about Pegasystems Inc. Pegasystems Inc. has extended the reach of a set of blueprints that leverages generative artificial intelligence to enable teams to collaboratively customize a set of workflow templates. Can you share more information?
Yeah, well, there's a whole trend going on here because there's also an article from Automation Anywhere talking about something similar where they are combining robotic process automation, RPA, with generative AI, and you can create your own agents and they'll actually learn and train themselves about how a process works. And then, you can automate that. And the interesting thing about that is subject matter experts and end users can create their own agents within that context to automate a process. So here's what's going on that's going to be really interesting from a digital CxO perspective as it relates to all this AI stuff. This time last year, it was a fight, right? Digital CxOs would show up and they'd want to change a process and there'd be this whole, let's evaluate the process. Then we got to test it and do all this stuff. And the IT people had to get involved. And it could be a year and a half before you actually manage to do something. With the rise of Gen AI and it's starting to be embedded in all these automation frameworks, you can now basically, end users can, for better or worse, do a lot of this stuff themselves. And they're basically going to start automating workflows in ways that digital CxOs probably never imagined, which brings another challenge. So instead of being at the opposite end of the spectrum where suddenly I can only get one or two initiatives going, and it's a fight to get each of them going, I'm now going to be, 1,000 flowers are going to bloom because everybody and his brother is going to be playing around with Gen AI tools to drive all kinds of new and different workflows in ways that might overwhelm an organization, right? You could go from the other end of the spectrum where chaos reigns and everybody's doing something different and none of these things are integrated. So I think the important thing for digital CxOs is kind of have to step up a little bit and say, what is the strategy for all this stuff going to be? And how are we going to implement it? And when are we going to implement it? And where's it going to make the most amount of sense? There's another article on the site talking about the rise of the chief AI officer. I'm not 100% bought in on that concept. I think that ultimately AI might become more of a feature than a thing, or at least it's a motion. But clearly there's going to be a need for digital CxOs to get together with CIOs and CISOs and chief data officers. And if there is an AI officer, clearly they all have to come together and kind of find a way to build an actual strategy here, because otherwise you're just throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks. And I can almost guarantee that's going to be a bad outcome.
Well, I think it all comes down to, and we've said this many times, communication skills and proper planning. So having an excellent plan in place, procedures in place, and then excellent communication.
Well, what's your sense of how good most organizations are at that?
They seem to be lacking a little bit. We still are dealing with silos. We still are dealing with, honestly, a lack of communication in this regard. So I think that's going to be a key issue, is training on better communication skills. And then everybody is just going to be required to wear multiple hats, as we're seeing in this day and age. You got to be able to step in and do more things than what you've been doing.
Yeah, and it seems to me also, I can't tell if the communications is any worse or better in smaller organizations versus larger organizations. I mean, relatively speaking, we're a smaller organization. We have our own challenges. I can't imagine, or it's been a while since I worked in a large organization, but in my experience, entire departments don't talk to each other. And then one of them goes and does something and everybody in the other department wakes up one morning and goes, what the heck was that?
Yeah. And the other part of this story too is, like you said, it could go two different ways, as everything speeds up and there's more projects going on all at once. it could be chaos. So of course, communication skills is one. But the other question I'm wondering, and I think a lot of leaders are, is once you have all the efficiency, are you going to be dropping employees because of all the efficiency, or are you going to take advantage of it and have way more going on, and then you're going to need more employees and be growing at a very fast rate, again, which requires communication skills?
I think the answer to that is yes, but I don't think there's an actual plan, right? I think a lot of people are going to wind up kind of sort of eliminating processes and automating them, and then kind of turning people loose. And then on top of that, they're going to be, wow, we have all these other new opportunities we can do. And they're going to go look for people that have those skills or have some AI capability to go execute that. May not be the same people. But to your point, unfortunately, and I wish it was a better story, I don't think enough organizations are really thinking hard about, we need to kind of take our existing people and upskill them. They're kind of more like, it's haphazard, right? They're kind of working through a process, and then they're going, we can automate this and it's going to be great, and this will be fabulous, and it'll drop to the bottom line and awesome. And not like therefore going also saying, well, what else can we do? That's because that's coming second or later. And so you wind up with this kind of two-step motion where we'll be more efficient and we'll probably reduce some jobs. And then on the other end of it, we will eventually add more jobs because we will create a better understanding of how to use this stuff and scale and interesting. But I'm just afraid it's not going to be a clean process. It's going to be disruptive. And I don't know any other way to get through that, because organizationally, most of these companies are not set up to do anything other than that.
Right. And I guess we've seen that with other revolutions. Any sort of innovative technology can be disruptive at the beginning as people wrap their minds around it.
Yeah. One guy had a great line, and I think I've heard it multiple times now, but essentially, AI is not going to take your job. It's somebody who knows how to use AI is going to take your job, because they're going to roll it up into their job, and then it's going to become something, that's a feature of somebody else's job. So clearly, if you want to hold on to your job, you need to start figuring out how to make this AI thing work. That said, coming back full circle, if you just start throwing AI at everything, you're probably going to anger somebody down the road who's going to go, how come you went and did this? Because you just broke 1,000 other things that were connected to that. Because all these processes have dependencies with each other. And that's the one thing I think digital CxOs have come to understand over the years, is that nothing exists in isolation. And it's very hard to push one thing forward without having this kind of cascading impact through the rest of the organization. Sometimes that's good. A lot of times it's not.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to, it's also not just about AI. There are many other technological tools out there. So I think it's more about having the ability to adapt and embrace change. And if you don't have an adaptive mindset and the ability to embrace change, that's when you're going to struggle.
There you have it. I'm not sure I have any great words of wisdom about how to go about all this. I mean, it's really, to your earlier communications thing, there's going to be a lot of, it's cultural as much as it is technical. And organizations have to decide, well, how much empathy are we going to have? And I think that may be the thing in shortest supply of all, is just understanding that even with AI, some great idea, not everybody's going to embrace it equally well unless they understand it and kind of can figure that out within the context of where their proverbial cheese is.
Absolutely. So moving on, this is a article by Nathan Eddy, and it's about the adoption of AI becoming a central focus for business globally, with 91% of tech leaders considering AI an important business priority, 69% already implementing or using it at scale. This is the result of an Experio survey conducted by IDC, which found that AI readiness is closely tied to company size, growth prospects, and maturity, which is creating a divide between leaders and laggards. What are your thoughts?
There has always been a divide between leaders and laggards, as far as I can remember. And leaders are leaders because, well, they have the foresight and the ability to kind of invest in things, and laggards are laggards because they don't. I'm not sure that the technology at hand changes that equation. I mean, I've been looking at these same surveys for, decades, and they're all the same and have been the same for as long as I can remember. I think what's interesting here is that, AI comes in multiple forms these days, right? So do I think most organizations are using AI? Yes. Are they using predictive AI, a la machine learning algorithms to kind of take a guess at what something might be and working that into some sort of e-commerce application or whatever? Absolutely. Do I think that they're using generative AI in a way that is more than just, employees playing around with how to write a better email? No. I just don't see them kind of like really operationalizing generative AI yet because their data's a mess. And if I don't have the right data, then what I expose to a Gen AI model is garbage in, garbage out, and the whole process is broken. So I think, a lot of organizations will say, yes, we're using generative AI, but that's not the same thing as to say that we've operationalized it, which is a completely different level of skill, and I think requires, the expertise of a digital CxO to get in there and say, this is what we can actually do with this thing that will consistently be applied and scale. And that consistent thing is probably the most important word, right? Because remember, this whole Gen AI thing, just like predictive, is a little on the probabilistic side, which means that it's a best guess. So if you've got a process that has to be 100% done the same way over and over again with the exact same high level quality of outcome, take another look at Gen AI, because that's not what it's about.
Well, and I think we're also, if we go back to the conversation we just had, this isn't just an AI thing either. AI is not the only tool out there. And I think, companies, as far as their embracing of technology in general, can put them behind or forward. And it all comes down to the way they're going to use it and a plan and what their end goal is.
Yeah. And I think you have to decide as a company what kind of company you are. Are you a technology company that happens to make something? That's a fundamentally different philosophy than a company that just says, we make something and we happen to use some IT stuff to support it. That's not quite the same thing at all. I think more and more companies are going to be technology companies that happen to do something else in a space, but they think like technology companies. And that means everything from, we're using software engineering and best practices to deliver better experiences through software consistently versus, we're just waiting on the next rev of, some SAP software somewhere that's going to update our supply chain.
Yeah. So next, this is a really neat article by a contributing writer, Simon, about quantum. So he says, in the quantum realm, diverse hardware modalities coexist, each with unique attributes and developmental stages. This variety has led to a siloed environment where each player in the quantum computing arena has its hardware or software ecosystem. At this early yet burgeoning stage of the quantum sector, a hardware-centric view, while understandable, could limit the broader application and innovation potential of quantum computing. He goes on to talk about the importance of software design in companies. And what are your thoughts about that and quantum?
All right. Well, new technology, same old problem. Every time there's a new technology, we all get very hardware-centric because, well, it's easier to build something when you're right there with that piece of hardware, and it's kind of like writing code in assembler back in the day. And then over time, we got higher levels of abstraction, so we could write more software more efficiently. The same thing's going to play out with quantum, right? Eventually, there'll be tools and compilers or whatever you want to call them that make it easier to build quantum applications that can run across multiple hardware platforms. Last time I checked, there were already a lot of quantum hardware platforms. Do any of them work? No idea. How many bits do you have? Who knows? Are the bits actually, part of my application is over there and it's over here and we're running it simultaneously and we're going to do some sort of magical thing that connects these things? We'll wait and see. But, so I'm not thinking that we're going to be using quantum computing outside of some rare instances anytime soon. And half the use cases that I've seen so far still run better on traditional infrastructure, and the traditional infrastructure is getting better all the time too. So I think quantum computing is going to be important, but what year is this? I think we're still measuring this in years. So I'm not like putting quantum computing into my digital business process transformation strategy anytime soon.
Yeah, I think, most business leaders are thinking about the potential for quantum, but from everything I'm hearing, we're a long way out from, quantum is still in the very beginning stages. And, once it's fully developed, there's a lot of use cases for it that could be amazing, but we are nowhere near there yet.
I look forward to it, though.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so next, work-life balance. This is something important to everyone, important for our health and our careers. And this is an article on Digital CxO. It says, the digital revolution has fundamentally transformed various industries, significantly impacting lifestyle sectors through the adoption of innovative digital engagement tools. These tools are not only altering traditional practices, but offering new modes of interaction and service delivery. Various tools are then shared, software tools as well, like Slack, Microsoft Teams, online health and wellness platforms like Northern Edge, and then things like low-code and no-code platforms are discussed, as well as many other tools. So what are your thoughts as far as work-life balance when it comes to this remote and digital world?
I don't know if there's a balance. I think, I was reading this article and then I thought about it and I was like, some time ago, I crossed over some line. And the line used to be kind of like, there was work and, you kind of like stitched a couple of personal things in during the day. And picked up your dry cleaning or whatever. And then you went home and then there was family life and that was kind of separate. And yet, truth be told, a lot of us are thinking about work when we're with the family, and sometimes we're thinking about family when we're at work. It's just part of the nature of the thing. And I feel like it's all starting to blur together. There are days when, it's the weekend, but my wife's got to go do something and my kids are off doing something, And so I got the ball game on and I might be clicking through some email. I mean, is that part of the work-life balance? I don't know. Is it mentally healthy? I don't know. But, I'm still here and I'm still cranking away. So I think other people, maybe that doesn't fit them. My wife likes life a little cleaner. She likes, work during the day and family life and, after dinner, and it's all separate in her world. I think each person has to strike their own balance.
I agree. It's all about the individual person and what they prefer. I know plenty of people who want to work, 8 to 5, and then they leave the office and they come home and they don't want to think about work anymore. That's done. They click it off. And then I would say that it's a lot harder, the people that I speak with that work online, such as ourselves. When you work online and you're connected all the time, when you're on your phone for personal, it just blends itself in there. The work just blends in and you find yourself, answering all the work emails too, and then clicking to Slack for messages. And you can't help but respond, or at least I find that I have difficulty in not just going ahead and responding, and it just all blends together. So
yeah, I didn't count how many emails you answered when you were allegedly on vacation a couple of weeks ago, but I noticed there was a few. The other side of that coin too is, so it's difficult to relax when you've got something that's sitting at work that's kind of, eating at the back of your mind. So if it is the weekend and you take 15 minutes to go resolve that issue, doesn't that make the rest of the weekend better because now you're not thinking about that thing?
Agreed. Exactly. Whereas some people would say, do not work, set it all aside, don't do it. For me, I'm that way. If I feel like something's looming over my head, I'd rather go spend an hour, get it knocked out and then feel relaxed the rest of the weekend.
Right. But now we have our friends in Europe who are like basically saying, you can't send an email to somebody outside of the normal work hours because, that's impinging upon them. And I'm always like, well, don't look at the email until you're ready. I don't get it.
Right, exactly. I find myself in, I do try to respect the boundaries of other people and understanding that, some people may not want to think about work outside those hours. So I think about when I'm sending my emails or my Slack messages, and I always say, this is just so I don't forget. And you look at it when you're back to work.
Right. Which hopefully they're not looking at until they're actually back to work.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's hard to find that balance for sure. But I think it's whatever individuals are different and whatever makes them most comfortable. Some people are comfortable. Like for me, I couldn't imagine coming back to 500 emails after a vacation. So I'd rather keep up with them. Other people want that break.
I hear you and I understand and I've seen both sides of it. But hey, if I wind up being wrong and, come visit me in the Looney House.
Well, meanwhile, read that article if you want some great tools, suggestions for tools or software platforms that could help make your work-life balance a little bit easier. Meanwhile, that brings us to the end of our list. So do you have any final thoughts?
No. The good news is no matter what's happening with AI, there's always going to be digital transformation, which means there's always going to be digital CxOs. So the fun part, it's easier to rock and roll than ever. The bad part, it's easier to rock and roll than ever.
All right. Well, that's a great way to end this segment. Have a great week, everyone. And go check out those articles if you want to read the full article. They're all on digital CxO. Thank you and have a great day.